Welcome to the Krueg Show. These are Monday's top headlines in sports. Okay, Larry, thanks for coming on again to your show. Okay, that's kind of funny, right? The Giants arguably signed the top free agent starting pitcher over the weekend when they linked up left-handed pitcher Carlos Rodon to a 2-year, $44 million contract. Krueg, what are the two key numbers on Rodon?
I think the two key numbers are 4 and 110. Now, 4 because he finished fourth in the American League Cy Young balloting last year with the White Sox. He had a 2.37 ERA, Len. He was totally dominant. 0.96 whip, 185 strikeouts, and only 36 walks in 132 and two-thirds innings over 24 starts. So this is a guy who's in his prime. He's 29. He's a lefty. He's missed a lot of time because of injuries, and that's been really a big thing with him is the injuries. But if he's over the injuries, the Giants really get something that's really solid here. And the deal reportedly includes an opt-out following the 2022 season if Rodon eclipses 110 innings. So 4 because he was the fourth best pitcher in the American League according to the Cy Young voting. And then 110 is a key number as well because if he can eclipse 110 in innings this year, he's going to be a free agent once again, next offseason. So those are the two key numbers. But if he's healthy, Len, I think the Giants got, an ace, a guy that they can put atop of their rotation and feel real confident that they've got, a replacement for Kevin Gausman and maybe even somebody who can improve on what Gausman gave them a year ago.
Krueg, what's the latest on Jimmy Garoppolo?
Well, there's a lot on Garoppolo. First of all, Mike Sando is reporting that the 49ers could wait until training camp to trade Jimmy Garoppolo, which seems hard to believe. Now, there's a bunch of teams that no longer need quarterbacks. Steelers added Mitchell Trubisky, so they're out. Denver added Russell Wilson in a trade, they're out. Washington picked up Carson Wentz, they're out. So who's in? Maybe Carolina, maybe New Orleans. They both would rather have Deshaun Watson, but he'll make his decision, and whoever doesn't land Watson will probably be on the list for Garoppolo. And then Indianapolis, could be on the list as well. If the Raiders traded Derek Carr to Indianapolis, there's some talk of that happening. The Raiders could be on the list for Jimmy Garoppolo with the ties to the New England franchise that they have currently in their organization. And then Adam Schefter said in early March, Len, that it's not a lock that the Niners trade Jimmy Garoppolo this offseason. I got to think that's posturing. Today, the NFL media's Tom Pelissero went on Good Morning Football on the NFL Network and told the host Kay Adams that the Niners are looking for more than a second-round pick for Garoppolo. In fact, they may want 2 second-round picks or a second-round pick and a player in addition. So is he dealt yet? No. Are they going to keep him until camp? Possibly, if you believe the stories out there. I think this still gets done maybe as soon as today. I got to think that, maybe a second round pick and a player, something like that, maybe a third round pick and a player. But I do think Jimmy Garoppolo gets dealt before Wednesday.
Tell me more about some of the Giants' recent acquisitions, Larry.
Well, we talked a little bit about Carlos Rodon, Len. That happened over the weekend. But then this, just in the last day or two, the Giants have signed a right-hander named Jakob Junis. He gets a 1-year major league contract for $1.75 million. And the Giants designated Hunter Harvey for assignment to create room on their 40-man. Well, he's an interesting guy. The Giants director of pitching, Brian Bannister, used to work in the Royals organization. And so he knows his player well. This is basically a 2-pitch pitcher, fastball, slider. His slider's his out pitch. That's really where he makes his money. He's mixed in a little bit of a cutter, but I think out of the bullpen where his velocity can ramp up and he can really focus on throwing that slider repeatedly, which is his best pitch, I think he could be really, really good in the bullpen. Now, the other name that was picked up this weekend is Carlos Martinez, the longtime Cardinals right-hander. And this is an interesting guy. I mean, he signs a minor league deal, so there's no major league guarantee. But if he makes the roster, $2.5 million is what he'll make. And, he's 30. Carlos Martinez was a 2-time All-Star with the Cardinals. And it wasn't that long ago that he was one of the best up-and-coming young pitchers in all of baseball. But he's had some injuries. He had a shoulder injury in spring training in 2019. Martinez missed nearly 7 weeks in 2020 following a lengthy bout that he had with COVID-19. Then he came out of that and had a strained oblique. and had, basically had his season cut down. And then he had a handful of dominant starts early last season. But then he sustained a torn ligament in his right thumb, eventually required surgery, and that ended his season in July. So he used to be 97, 98 on the gun, throwing major smoke. That 97, 98 is probably down to like 93, 94. But if the Giants don't need him in the rotation. They've got Rodon, they've got DeSclafani, they've got Alex Wood, they've got Alex Cobb, not to mention Logan Webb. So they don't need Martinez in the rotation. They might be able to put him in the bullpen and, have him as kind of like rotation depth. Maybe he's their long man. If you shorten him up and put him in the pen, maybe his 98 mile an hour fastball returns. So two interesting names. Both of them at this point have to be viewed as nothing more than, long relievers, bullpen options, and starting pitching depth.
Okay, so I have a two-parter for you.
Sure.
Where does wide receiver rank on the 49ers offseason wish list? And what kind of receiver is John Lynch looking for?
Well, it's a good question. First of all, yes, wide receiver is a major need. Now, I would say corner is probably a bigger need. Pass rusher is probably a bigger need. Maybe offensive line, if you're looking for a particular player now that they lost Tomlinson today, that could be a bigger need. But they need a very specific wide receiver. Deebo Samuel is a physical player. Brandon Ayuk, incredibly physical player. Jawan Jennings is 6'3", about 225, big physical, move the chains kind of a player. What the Niners need is they need a deep threat. They need a speedy guy, somebody who can run, separate down the field, open things up underneath for their other receivers, and somebody who can be a home run threat on special teams. So Matt Barrows, our good friend, has tweeted out that Jakeem Grant, Ray McCloud, and Khalif Raymond are all guys that the Niners will have interest in. Raymond played in Detroit last year under the new 49er assistant head coach, Anthony Lynn. So that's an interesting one. I'm a big fan of Jakeem Grant, Len. I love Grant. He started last year with Miami, got traded to Chicago, and he's a terrific return guy. Explosive and fast and a big play guy. Josina Anderson is also reporting that the Niners are among 5 teams that's showing preliminary interest in Packers free agent wide receiver Marques Valdes-Scantling. And Valdes-Scantling's a home run hitter. He's another guy with deep speed. So, there's one common denominator of all these receivers. They can all run and they can all make plays down the field. And you look at Valdes-Scantling, 18 of his 26 receptions this last year went for a first down. He averaged over 6 yards after the catch. So he's a great run after the catch receiver, which would kind of be in line with what they already have. But all those guys are impact space creating wideouts that if you put them on this team, it might really open things up for Kittle and Deebo and Ayuk underneath. So I expect they'll land one of those speed receivers and probably not at a very high price.
Huge story broke this morning in the National League West. Padres lost Tatis again to a wrist injury.
Yeah, now they're saying that maybe it was a motorcycle injury. I saw that. It's unconfirmed at this point. But, man, Fernando Tatis Jr. is snake bit. I mean, he is one of the best young players in the game, Len. This guy's awesome. As a fielder, as a hitter, he's as good as it gets. But he's had consistent wrist problems. I mean, he's had tendon issues. He's had, cartilage issues. Now he's got a broken bone in the wrist. And they're saying Kevin Acee was the reporter on this down in San Diego. Acee tweeted out that he may be out for 3 months. So, that's all of April, all of May, all of June. So, the Padres are going to have to go forward without one of the best players in the game and their best player for probably half the season. So, and then can Tatis get over these wrist problems that he's had? I mean, he's had a number of different wrist injuries, and it's like the only thing that could derail this kid's career is if somehow that wrist can't get right. And obviously this story is an ugly one if you're a Padre fan. I would say, the Padres are trying to bounce back this year with Bob Melvin, new manager. They need Tatis Jr. to be the star player that he is. Sounds like they're not going to have him until maybe the 4th of July.
What's your read on Tom Brady's brief retirement? It's kind of short, right?
40 days. How about that? 40 days of retirement. Now he's back. Well, there's a story out that from quoting an NFC source saying that maybe Brady came out of retirement or decided to retire, trying to force Tampa to trade him to his hometown 49ers so he could play one more year. And maybe that didn't work. Or maybe clearly at this point it didn't work, and now he just wants to play. And ultimately, it comes down to: do you want to retire? Do you want to play for Tampa? Now, I still got to think there's a chance if he really wants to play for the Niners that he could try to force his way in a trade to the 49ers. But for the moment, he's playing another year. He retired for 40 days, and he's going to play in Tampa. So. Will Tampa trade him for Jimmy Garoppolo? I mean, I can't see that happening. Will they trade him at all to the 49ers? Doesn't sound like that's going to happen. So, very interesting story, probably worth following more, but Tom Brady's back. And at least we had that one right the other day. And we talked about would he unretire? He has unretired, as we said,
Yep.
Except I was hoping he'd come back and play for the Niners. And it sounds like maybe that's not going to be a reality. He might have to come back and play another year with Tampa.
So we're closing out here. Are the 49ers in need of a number one corner?
That's exactly what they need. They leaned on Jason Verrett and K1 Williams and Emmanuel Mosley. K1 and Verrett are free agents. Mosley's their number one corner right now. What the Niners don't have is they don't have a true number one corner. And this is a division that has DeAndre Hopkins with Arizona, Cooper Kupp with the Rams, DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett up in Seattle. So you're going to face elite receivers. Think about that. There's 3 teams in your division. You play them each twice. So 6 games this year against teams in the division that have elite receivers. So the Niners absolutely need a corner. They don't need any corner. They need a true number one corner. Who's out there? Well, J.C. Jackson played at Maryland. He's been playing with the Patriots. They didn't franchise him. He's out there. Carlton Davis is out there. Stephon Gilmore's out there. Charvarius Ward for the Kansas City's out there as well. All these guys would be viable. J.C. Jackson, to me, would be the guy that I'd go after. But they're going to need to trade Jimmy Garoppolo and free up, that $20 million of available cap room to be able to afford a guy like J.C. Jackson. So in some ways, the Garoppolo potential trade is tied to, any addition of a number one corner. So that makes me think that the Niners will make this move with Garoppolo before Wednesday, and Wednesday they'll sign one of those top tier corners.
Any final notes or stories that came up in the last minute before you get on the broadcast that you wanted to address before we sign off?
Yeah, there is one, Len. Thanks for bringing that up. Laken Tomlinson is gone. So there was a lot. I know there are a lot of Niner fans who were like, oh, man, the priority's got to be re-signing Laken Tomlinson. Well, let me just give you a little insight into the NFL. Unless you are Quentin Nelson, unless you're just an elite going to Canton, Ohio Hall of Fame kind of a player, NFL teams don't want to pay guards. Tomlinson got some pretty good cash to jump to the Jets. So Robert Saleh takes the Niners starting left guard. I would imagine Aaron Banks, who was a day 2 draft choice of the 49ers a year ago, will plug in at left guard where he played at Notre Dame next to Trent Williams. But the 49ers are probably looking for a guard in free agency in addition to that. John Feliciano is a name that's been mentioned, the former Raider, the former Miami Hurricane. I do think they'll go into the free agent market and get a guard, but it will be at a far less price point than what Tomlinson just got to jump to the Jets. So I personally think DJ Jones would be my priority in re-signing of the Niners' current free agents. Who's the priority? I'd say it's DJ Jones. A lot of people said it was Tomlinson, though, and I think you found out today that it's not Tomlinson. The 49ers, Tomlinson was coming off a big year, and you knew he was going to get huge offers. And sure enough, the Jets dropped one in his lap, and I'm happy for Laken. I'm happy for his family. And for the 49ers, you know what? You spend your money on the offensive line at tackle. You don't spend your money at guard. So they'll get a replacement, and they'll spend a whole lot less on that replacement than they potentially would have spent on Laken Tomlinson.
That's awesome. That's a wrap. Thanks for watching the Larry Krueger Show. Like and subscribe. Share with your friends.